Hey guys, welcome to another Myth or Truth episode. Time to debunk some more myths or find some more truths. And I am actually recording a whole lot of them at the same time, so we'll see how I'm gonna span them throughout a few episodes. And I'm hoping to get to all of your myth and truth, but if you don't see your myth debunked in today's episode, don't worry, I will do so probably in the next episode. So before we start, this video is of course sponsored by rePotme.com, who offers you everything you could possibly need to properly take care of your orchid, from pots to potting medium, accessories, and everything in between. And not only for orchids, but also for other houseplants as well. So I will link you to their website down below. Feel free to check them out at any time. They have some new products, and I will also share with you the products that I really like, and I think you will like too. Right, so with that said, let us start today's session. Let's see how many myths we can debunk today. Next myth or truth from Jen. I've seen YouTube videos that using garlic water is very healthy for orchids, helps them grow. Is this true? No, it is false. Or, you know, I shouldn't really be saying these absolute terms when I'm not a scientist, right? It's unbecoming of me. I think it's false, because I don't see any evidence of that, and certainly in my experience, it doesn't even do anything for pests. So, to be quite honest with you, I don't see how all of these concoctions really do any good, and moreover, I think it's just placebo. I have a video, I don't know if I posted it already. I have a video in which I explained that some people believe that garlic water is good against pests because if you spray it every day with garlic water, pests are under control. It's not the garlic, it's the mere fact that you run water on the leaves and you wash away some pests. But see, you put garlic in it and it couldn't be just water, right? It's the garlic, when in fact it's just the act of running water through the leaves. I'll give you an example. You do an omelet and it turns out to be the best omelet you've ever made, and then your friends tell you, this is the best omelet I've ever eaten, give me the recipe. And then you think back, oh, what did I do that's so special, that makes this omelet so special? Well, I cracked the egg, I stirred the egg, I did a little loop, like a little dance, then I put some salt, and then I did another dance, and then I put some tomatoes, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure which one of these steps did it, so I'm just gonna include all of them. So you're gonna see the recipe: crack the eggs, stir the eggs, do the rain dance, add salt, do the 70s dance, blah, blah, blah. And you're gonna be like, wait a second, how can a dance help the omelet be better? It doesn't. But because you don't know which of the steps made the best omelet of life, you're gonna include all of them. So this is what happens with a lot of these experiments or these tips you see on the internet. They are part of maybe a bigger procedure. Maybe what helped an orchid is higher humidity. But then you spritzed a little bit some rose water on it. Could it be the humidity or the rose water? You don't know what helped, so you're gonna put everything out there. Or it's just clickbait. So this is how I see things. I'm not a scientist. I cannot tell you with the accuracy of a microscope if anything helps or not. But my knowledge and my understanding of things tells me that all of this is just useless. And it's just out there because, I don't know, it's fun to think that if we do a little rain dance, by the way, in Romania, the rain dance is called paparuda. So if we do the dance, things will work out better. I don't know, we're gonna have the omelet of life. This is how I see these things, you guys. It's up to you, I guess. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't hassle with garlic. Garlic stinks. I hate garlic. I think I'm a vampire. Well, I'm Romanian, so I might have a relative that goes back to Vlad Țepeș. Could it be? I'm not allergic to silver though. What's the fairy tale about vampires? Next myth or truth. I don't know if this is a myth or truth, so hang with me here. But do hybrids act like mutts? When hybridize, does it eliminate problems the species are prone to? Okay, I'm not familiar with breeding of dogs and what mutts actually means. Growing up and watching cartoons and stuff, the term mutt was derogatory kind of, so I'm not entirely sure if it means something, excuse me about that. But I will say partially true, but it's more for our benefit. because some hybrids might actually be very hard to grow in normal home conditions with low humidity and higher temperatures maybe and all of those stuff. And by hybridizing a particular species with a more tolerant species, we can actually obtain a hybrid that maybe looks or has the good traits of the species we cannot really grow, but the hardiness of the other species. It's what we call hybrid vigor. So yeah, some hybrids are indeed created or selected because they are so vigorous and they are so forgiving and they can thrive in a home environment, and that's good for business. But there are other hybrids that are just bred for aesthetics and maybe for certain traits that we find desirable, maybe fragrance, maybe it's the Nelly Eiler, case in which we don't care about anything else other than how beautiful it is. So hybridization can eliminate some stuff, but we cannot obtain something that is maybe identical to the species minus the issues. It will have some traits, and yeah, possibly sometimes it will be more tolerant to our home conditions. So it's more in our benefit. The species themselves don't have problems. They're perfect. They're perfectly adapted to wherever they grow. Just because I cannot grow Masdevallias properly doesn't mean it's a problem with them. No, it's a problem with me expecting to grow a cool grower in the desert, pretty much. But I get your point. I think this was what you were interested in. By hybridization, can we make something more tolerant to our conditions? Absolutely, yes, we can. And sometimes, yes, through hybridization, this is what hybridizers are looking for. But it's mostly aesthetics. Next, myth or truth. Mini Phalaenopsis are more prone to dehydration than large Phalaenopsis. If this is true, it is due to smaller roots on the mini Phalaenopsis. Thanks, Danny. Okay, so first part, true. Second part, false. How should we call this one? Yes, you will discover sometimes that mini phals are more prone to dehydration because typically we put them in smaller pots, especially after we purchase them and they're tiny. When they grow, they will probably be in larger pots. But that's just because we put them in smaller pots. Easily fixable with using more water-retentive media. Now, is it due to smaller roots? No. No. Mini Phalaenopsis have a ton of roots, just like the big phals, and they also have thick roots. I don't think there's much of a difference between the mini phals and the bigger phals when it comes to the actual size of the root. So yeah, they might require more attention to watering, but due to totally other reasons. The roots, they're just as big, just as unruly or beautiful or charming as the big Phalaenopsis. So be prepared to pot your mini phal eventually in a normal pot. It will happen. Next, myth or truth from Larissa. You should take your plants outside anytime weather permits. False. It doesn't really make much of a difference. Also, the outside world has pests and also maybe some animals or birds or something. So I don't know, some people really do like to keep some orchids outside. Some of them do better outside depending on environment. I gave up growing them outside because I have grow lights now, so that's great. And I wouldn't put them outside again because it's too dry, it's too hot, it's just not okay. Why should I put them outside in the spring when my grow space has all of its windows open and has adequate light? There's no need to put them outside. Definitely you can have perfectly healthy and vigorous and thriving plants if you keep them inside. Myth or truth, growing orchids in Orbeez, it's better because they hold in water better and provide good aeration. False. False. It's an optical illusion again. So, Orbeez are those round little beads that get full of water. They are jelly-like, so the illusion of having spaces in between them is very high, but it's wrong. Since they are flexible and gummy, they compress. The more Orbeez you put on top of each other, the more or less air pockets you're gonna have on the lower levels. So what you will end up with is a mush of water without proper aeration, because they're not hard spheres like leca would be. With leca, we have such a thing called sphere packing, in which you can actually calculate the amount of empty space in between the beads. But with Orbeez, you can't rely on that because they are gummy. Now, it's a fun medium. I've seen actually in flower shops some Phalaenopsis in this medium, and I thought, oh, should I buy one and make a video about it? I don't feel like paying so much just for a bunch of Orbeez, because the mini phal from like 8 euros was like 25. I'm not gonna pay that much for Orbeez, no. So it's kind of fun as a decoration. Maybe you can get away with a little bit of time, but long term, I would not put orchids in Orbeez. It doesn't really hold as much air as you'd think it would. They're fun though. Orbeez are kind of fun. They're all jelly and squishy. I don't know why I like them, but not with orchids. Next up, myth or truth, orchids can be repotted using live sphagnum moss. True. Yes, you can actually grow some orchids, at least in live mosses or live sphagnum moss. As I was saying in a previous video, not sure which myth or truth at this point, one of them. I'm recording a lot at the same time. So in my opinion, any potting mix or medium you can think of that has 3 rules that it follows can work with orchids. Rule 1, allow for water. Rule 2, allow for air. Rule 3, not be chemically and physically damaging. Mosses are fluffy, they're usually wet because mosses do good in high humidity, but they're also airy because they have those little strands that just hug the root. They're great. Mosses are great. So tiny orchids such as masdevallias, I think they grow wonderful, or they could grow wonderful in mosses, especially the big fluffy mosses. I like mosses, but I cannot grow mosses in this climate. Definitely, I would love to have a mini garden with moss and little orchids. They can definitely grow in live moss, whatever moss that is. I'm not aware of any moss that produces byproducts like toxins and stuff. As long as it's not algae and it's moss, it's good. And yeah, I think some orchids, especially the small ones, would thrive in moss. And it would look great as well. If you can do an experiment, do so. I think it's gonna turn out lovely. Alrighty then, so that is about it for today. We have some really good myth or truths lately, don't we? Keep them coming. I love this series. Do you guys love it too? I hope you do. I really like it. I will make some Q&A series as well. I'm thinking about it. If I didn't already start, it depends when I'm uploading this. If I did, then, you know, good going, future Danny. But yeah, stay tuned for that series as well. But for now, this will have to do. Hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me today. Thank you for watching, and thank you rePotme for sponsoring yet another episode. And with that said, hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye.